All right, Packer Nation, we're going to start this unit off um, with just a real basic, what I call a primer, just a starter with some key terms. And I'm really excited about what Unit 5 is going to do for us because it's really something different than everything else, anything else that we do in history. So you've got the notes sheet, and what I'm going to do is just kind of run down some of these basic terms that we're going to use here in this little Unit 5 called Boom and Bust, an economic history of the United States. Now, economics is absolutely one of those answers that we have when students say, why don't we ever talk about things that we're going to use in real life? Because this is the language of real life. Um, and it is an incredible undertaking. It tries to mush together science and math and human behavior in a way that tries to answer everything from how much should an iPhone cost to what's the best way to help people that don't have enough food. So it's really this epic idea, economics is. And so it's super fascinating and it really helps us understand what has happened throughout history. So, bonus points if you can explain all four pictures. All right, so there are lots of definitions of economics out there, and this one is not the best one. But if you just start with the picture, it gives you a little bit of an idea. If everything in the picture is about economics, you begin to understand how big of a topic economics is. Not only is it the things that the people are talking about, but it's also the table, it's also the chairs, it's also what those people do when they leave the table and chairs. It's also these things that they want or they're talking about. So economics is the study of how groups of people decide who gets what. And you can talk about a family as a focus of economics. That would be microeconomics. Or you could talk about a country and how they decide who gets what. That would be macroeconomics. So there's all kinds of ways to look at this. But if we talk about who gets what, and we'd mean everything from money to food to houses to jobs to musical instruments, everything really talks about economics in one way or another. And so we just talk about who gets what. How do we decide who gets an iPhone? How do we decide who makes an iPhone? How did we decide to allow for iPhones to be created? These sorts of things. Now, if we want to keep it real simple, and because this is a history class, not an econ class, you'll take that in 12th grade with Mr. Marquis. Instead, what we want to do is keep it very simple. We're going to talk about two different economic systems. One is called the command economy, right? Now, I hate to put that pizza up there because I love pizza and I don't usually need an excuse to get it. But the reason I put that pizza up there is that person is deciding who gets what. That is, how big are the pieces of pizza, who's going to get them, what shape they're going to be in, a small group of people. In this case, just those persons' beefy hands. And in a command economy, a small group of people, usually the government, decides who gets what. Now you might say, well, is that like? Now there are lots of different types of command economies, and perhaps communism is a familiar one, or at least one that you've heard of. But there are different ways to run in a command economy. But if a small group of people are deciding who gets what, that is a command economy. Now, the other idea when it comes to economics is this idea of a free market economy. Now, you can see there that in the picture you have a team that's clearly won or is winning and a team that has lost. And that is the basis of the free market economy. That there is competition between independent businesses, say Android and Apple, Microsoft and Apple, Google, whatever you want to say, if we're talking about phones. Competition between independent businesses and individuals decides who gets what. So the idea is that soccer team won because they worked the hardest, studied the right sets, practiced the most, ate the healthiest, slept the most, whatever it was, and now they're the best. They got the win. And the idea is in a command or free market economy, rather, in a free market economy, the companies and the individuals that work the hardest, have the best ideas, study the hardest, these sorts of things, they're the ones who get to decide who gets what. The idea being that Steve Jobs was such a brilliant leader and idea person that he made Apple this powerful, powerful company. Now, when we talk about economics, it's really never black and white. It's never just one thing. But all economies, whether it's your family or our country or another country, has to answer a few basic questions. And the first question is, how much of a command economy idea do we want to use? Remember, the command economy is the pizza idea, that one person or a few people is deciding exactly how to cut up that pizza. How can we make sure that everyone has the things they need? That's the idea behind a command economy. If I have the pizza, I can decide and make sure that everybody gets a slice of pizza. Now, we're not getting into whether the pizza slices should all be the same or if different people should get different slices of pizza, but the point is, I have the pizza, I can decide who cuts it up. And then another question that economies have to answer, your family's household, our country's economy, the world economy, how much free market ideas or how many free market ideas do we want to use, right? That is, how much freedom should we give businesses and their money to allow for creativity, right? The idea that the United States says, hey, there's cell phone services and we'll make sure that you have towers, but you want to make a cell phone, you make a cell phone, right? You do whatever you want to do to make a cool cell phone. And so people have freedom then to work for different companies, to come up with their own ideas. Those are free market, the idea being competition. Remember that soccer game. Now here's the key. Here's the key. This is really important. This is the high school level stuff. Okay? Nearly every economy ever, almost every economy ever uses parts of both ideas. There's very, very few economies that are totally free market or totally command. Okay? So for example, the US, when most people retire in the United States, most people get a check from the government. You may have heard of this before, called Social Security. Well, that's a command economy idea. The idea that a few people, the government, is in charge of Social Security, makes sure that everybody gets a piece of that pizza, right? So in the United States, we have some ideas that come from the command economy. We also have a lot of ideas that come from the free market economy. The majority of the United States ideas come from the free market economy. All those big companies that are American companies are generally run by people or groups of people, and the government can't tell a particular company what to do in general. Of course, there are exceptions. So those are the questions that any economy has to answer. How much of the command economy ideas do we want to use? How much of the free market economies do we want to use? And the last idea, this is the last economic idea that I want to make sure we have locked away, is that this economic idea of a trade-off. You can look at the picture, you can hear the word trade-off, and you pretty much have the basic idea, but it's a crucial idea in economics. A trade-off is the option that a person can't do because they chose another option. So I understand that most of you could eat a donut and an apple, but for simplicity's sake, if you choose to eat the donut, you can't eat the apple, at least at the same time. Don't talk about blenders. If you choose to eat the apple, you can't eat the donut at the same time, right? So if you get a job after school, a trade-off is you have less time to, really, you don't need me to show you that box. You can answer that question, right? And if a country declares war, this is another example. So you have the microeconomic example. If you get a job after school, a trade-off is you have less time to do. And if a country declares war, a trade-off is that it has less money and less people to do something else. What is something else a government or a country could do with the money and the people that it's spending on the war? So what you have now is this basic big picture of economics. What I'm going to ask that you do is you take these notes that you filled in and then click over and take the learning check really quickly just to make sure we're on the same page with it. Then you have 2 more assignments this week. Thanks. Let me know if you have any questions.